Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 205 based on novel. So let's start. The vastness of the city seemed far beyond Xiao Yan's expectation. When he regained his consciousness again, the noisy voice in the rear had already disappeared, and the high stone gate was even missing. Until a moment, in the endless city in front of Xiao Yang, the straight streets below suddenly changed. The street that originally led to the end suddenly split into 5 streets in different directions, and Xiao Yang's body also stopped in front of these 5 streets. His sight swept from the 5 streets, but Xiao Yang frowned slightly. He thought of what Tianying had said to him. There are 3 different halls in the Tianjua ancient tomb, and the life cultivation of the Tianjua master is also divided into 3 parts, which are sealed in one hall. The way to open the hall is to show the famous skill of the Tianjua master. But looking at the 5 streets in front of him, Xiao Yang can imagine that the road leading to the 3 halls should be in these 5 streets. However, if you want to find the halls correctly, there is some trouble. Although only 2 of these 5 streets are false, if they are careless, they also have the risk of mistakes. Once Chen Zhan and others seize the opportunity, they may miss him, whether it is the inheritance of fighting spirit, the power of the origin of the soul, or the decision to return to the source. Even if the odds are small, he can't miss it. Glancing back and forth at the 5 streets in front of him, Xiao Yang frowned and didn't know how to choose. Once the choice is wrong, it is very likely to cause irreparable results to him. We must not be wrong. However, under the exploration of Xiao Yang's soul power, there are no abnormal energy fluctuations in these 5 streets. In other words, there is no possibility to accurately find the hall where the fighting spirit inheritance is located, except relying on intuition and luck. At the thought of this, Xiao Yang couldn't help but sink a little. Although the probability of going wrong is very small, he can't tolerate any mistakes. However, the current situation is that he has nothing to do except relying on luck. There seems to be a special prohibition in this space. His soul power will be blocked when it spreads to 100 feet around his body, which also makes Xiao Yang unable to explore the end of these 5 streets. The soul power is limited, which makes Xiao Yang's heart more heavy. However, at this time, in Xiao Yang's dark eyes, his expression is slightly coagulated, and a weak soul wave comes from the ring. After a while, Xiao Yang's spirit was refreshed. As soon as his wrist turned, a palm-sized jade bottle suddenly fell into his hand. What he saved was the remnant soul of Xiao Xian. At this moment, the abnormal soul wave also diffuses from it. Aware of the fluctuation of the soul, Xiao Yang's face changed slightly, and there was a suppressed ecstasy and excitement in his face. Up to now, the remnant soul of Xiao Xian finally reacted, which further proved that it was not far from Xiao Xian's resurrection. Buzzing, buzzing. Just when Xiao Yang's face showed a look of ecstasy, the remnant soul of Xiao Xian in the jade bottle once again sent out an extremely weak soul wave. Looking at this, it seems to be attracted by something. It is not difficult to guess that in this ancient tomb, the only force that can attract Xiao Xian's soul should be the original force and return to the source of heaven's unique human soul. Although the soul spread from the remnant soul of Xiao Xian fluctuated very weakly, it was accurately captured by the powerful soul power of Xiao Yang's 4th-level herbalist. Looking along the direction of the soul wave diffusion, Xiao Yang soon identified 3 streets. At this time, he still showed his heavy face a moment ago, but now he showed a happy smile, forced himself to suppress his excited mood, and Xiao Yang looked brightly at the 3 streets. It seems to be intentional. The 3 streets leading to the hall are actually the right and left sides and the most central streets, while the 2 streets sandwiched in the center are false. After finding out the exact location of the 3 halls, Xiao Yang thought for a while, but turned and chose the street near the left. In order to avoid some people who resolutely choose to run amok, Xiao Yang believes that it is safer to take the side road. Now that the direction has been selected, Xiao Yang's body soon disappeared here. After a while, Chen Zhan and others came here. In the face of 5 different directions, several people who came one after another hesitated. They didn't know the truth. They had more concerns than Xiao Yang. As a result, just as Xiao Yang expected, Most people decisively chose to go straight to the end, and only a few chose other streets. However, fortunately, they preferred the street where Xiao Yang was on the left, but nobody cares. Until a certain moment, a group of people led by a young man came to these 5 intersections. Little Lord, Xiao Yang has erased his breath. His subordinates can't tell where he went. On the side of the young man, the old man in white frowned, and finally opened his mouth reluctantly. Oh, since I will come to you, I naturally thought of this. Hearing the speech, the young man smiled indifferently, stretched out his palm, and the light on the ring between his fingers flickered slightly. Soon, a cyan jade card appeared in the young man's hand. If Xiao Yang was present at the moment, he would be able to recognize it. The cyan jade card is a Kai Hanyu. As far as he knows, only Murong Qianxian and him have this thing except Cold Frost. Kai Hanyu appeared in his hand, and a little fighting spirit was injected into the young man's palm. Then, an inexplicable energy fluctuation immediately spread out. The young man's eyes looked at it and identified the street on the left, which was the direction of Xiao Yang. Chase me. I'll see how much you can do today. With a cold drink, the young man immediately flew away towards the street on the left. The young man did not hesitate, moved, and followed closely. Half an hour later, Xiao Yang's flying body finally stopped again. At this time, in front of him, there was an ancient hall with closed stone doors. Don't think about it. This must be the place where the fighting spirit of heaven and heaven is sealed. However, compared with this, Xiao Yang is more curious about whether the original power of the soul and the formula of returning to the source will also exist here. A thought flashed through his mind. Xiao Yang moved, and Tianjue step opened in the open space in front of the hall. Then, the closed stone door in front of him seemed to be induced, and slowly opened under Xiao Yang's hot eyes. The stone door of the hall slowly opened, and Xiao Yang's vision gradually expanded. When the stone door was completely opened, what appeared in front of Xiao Yang was a huge empty palace. The space in the hall was huge, especially empty. Only in the deepest part of the hall can you see a huge stone chair, which fits perfectly with the back wall. It looks like it was carved from the original wall. It is not difficult to imagine that the stone chair is the master of the tomb house and the seat of heaven's absolute master. However, on the stone chair at the moment, it is spotless, and there is no half-human shadow, even the bones of the supreme master of heaven. It seems that the bones of God Ju don't exist here. For this, Xiao Yang doesn't care. What he is curious about is the power of the original source of Tianjue's soul and the formula to return to the source, that's all. A few steps into the hall, Xiao Yang saw a huge energy light mass suspended in the center of the hall. Xiao Yang's intervention made the originally motionless light mass emit some energy fluctuations. Buzzing. A slight buzzing sound came out, and a magnificent energy breath swept out from the energy light group and roared to Xiao Yang. Although this energy breath seems weak, when it blows out, RAO is determined by Xiao Yang, and the expression on his face can't help but change. Although this breath is not strong, its power, even Xiao Yang, can't be underestimated. His arms were raised, and his fighting spirit surged up quickly. Then, Xiao Yang struggled to resist the energy breath. Even at the moment of blocking it, Xiao Yang couldn't help but withdraw half a step backward. It can be seen how powerful this breath is. Is it the inheritance of fighting spirit? But in that case, where is the original power of the human soul? Whispered in his mouth. Xiao Yang looked around, but even after seeing the whole hall, he couldn't find any power related to the soul, let alone the source formula. Isn't it here? Immediately, a suspicious thought appeared in Xiao Yang's heart. If the source power and return formula of the soul were not here, where would it be? Is it in the other 2 halls? If God Ju's idea is obtained by fate, it is not impossible, but if so, will God Ju's soul origin and return formula fall into the hands of others? No, you must return immediately. When his heart shook, Xiao Yang also ignored the fighting spirit inheritance in front of him. As soon as he turned around, he wanted to leave here. However, at the next moment. At the moment Xiao Yang turned around, at the door behind him, a line of people dressed in white robes poured in quickly, and the 2 heavy stone doors were ruthlessly closed after these people entered. Well, Xiao Yang's heart suddenly sank for some reason. At the same time, he raised his eyes and looked at the opposite party. The person who led the team was a young man slightly older than Qin Yun. At the moment, when Xiao Yang looked at the young man, the latter was staring at him. Together with the people behind him, his eyes were also cold. Seeing this, Xiao Yang narrowed his eyes and glanced at the fighting spirit in the hall behind him. Then he looked at a group of people in front of him and said in a deep voice, "Ladies and gentlemen, I can give you the fighting spirit inheritance in this hall, but I'm leaving now. I don't know if you can make it convenient." As he spoke, Xiao Yang's eyes fell on the young man who was the leader, and he stared at the latter. He could see that the young man was the real master among these people. Therefore, whether he could let these people make way and leave here depended on the young man's decision. "Are you Xiao Yang?" Although the identity of the latter has long been determined, the young man still couldn't help asking questions. Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang's heart sank. If these people really came for him, they had just met them so far. Even the other party could not be completely sure of his identity. He had never seen them before. How could he have hatred with them? "Answer my question." The young man's voice sank and frowned. Xiao Yang's hostile attitude for no reason also made him feel warm and angry. He was in a hurry to leave now, and he didn't have time to delay with them. At the moment, his voice sank, and he also whispered and said, "I'm Xiao Yang, but it seems that I've met you for the first time. If there's nothing wrong, I hope you can get out of the way. I can let you take away the fighting spirit in the hall." Since you admit that you are Xiao Yang, then do it, call me and teach him a hard lesson. However, the young man was not like Xiao Yang's imagination. After confirming the identity of the person in front of him, he waved his arm and pointed his slender fingers at Xiao Yang. At the same time, he gave a sharp drink in his mouth, and his fighting spirit surged up. The people behind him also rushed towards Xiao Yang. There were 13 people in the party, including 2 9-star Dipper Emperors, 4 8-star Dipper Emperors and 6 7-star Dipper Emperors. As for the young man, perhaps because he was decorated with some special objects, Xiao Yang could not confirm the cultivation of the latter before fighting with him. At the same time, in the face of the 13 high-level fighting emperors, if it was normal, Xiao Yang would certainly retreat if he could. But the current situation makes Xiao Yang have no way out. If he wants to leave here, he can't go back. On the contrary, he must solve this group of people in front of him in a short time. With a flick of his fingers, the purple and golden light suddenly appeared around him. His strength had just broken through to the North King in the middle of the 9-star fighting emperor. At the moment, he met a hard battle. "I have something important to do. Let's make a quick decision." With a low cry, Xiao Yang's heart moved. The fighting spirit surged in his body. His body and the North King on one side shot out at the same time. The fire was all open and met the 13 strong fighting emperors who came forward. Although these people already know Xiao Yang's cultivation level, it seems that they came a little late. Although they saw the North King devour Lei Long and become the 9-star fighting emperor, they didn't see the scene of Xiao Yang killing Jianming with one punch. Therefore, the 13 high-ranking fighting emperor strongmen in this line at the moment have no idea about the combat power of the latter. They are still aware of the 6-star duty, and this is bound to bring them a great surprise. Don't be ashamed. Even if you are a puppet with the strength of the 9-star fighting emperor, you'll think too much of his strength if you want to deal with us. Hearing the words from Xiao Yang's mouth, an old man in white robe sneered at the strong fighting emperor in that line. At the same time, his body shook, and the speed of rushing forward suddenly became more rapid. In a twinkling of an eye, he had come to Xiao Yang, while the other 9-star fighting emperor flew in front of the North King. The offensive was fierce and bombarded the latter. Facing a puppet at the level of 9-star fighting emperor, they dare not have the slightest carelessness. Xiao Yang's eyes looked at the soaked old man close at hand, but he couldn't help feeling suspicious. At such a close distance, he could more clearly feel the exclusive hostility towards him in the latter's eyes. However, that hostility seemed far from reaching the point where he wanted to get rid of it. In other words, as the young man said, their purpose was really to teach him a lesson, not to kill him. At the thought of this, Xiao Yang was more surprised. "Boy, You dare to be distracted in the face of the 9-star duty. You can't die. The old man drank fiercely, and his raised palm fell down against Xiao Yang. His powerful fighting spirit brought invisible ripples in the surrounding void, and watched it fall on Xiao Yang's shoulder. At this time, Xiao Yang's body suddenly twisted, and the old man's dry palm flew over Xiao Yang's shoulder, quietly turning a corner of his black robe into fragments. What? How fast is this boy? The old man was surprised. Even if he wanted to avoid at such a close distance, it was quite difficult, but Xiao Yang in front of him did it so easily, which was really surprising. However, what shocked him even more was still ahead. Bang! Just when the old man was shocked by Xiao Yang's reaction speed, Xiao Yang's palm had fallen on his shoulder. Then, a huge force spewed out from Xiao Yang's palm. Just one blow was to blow the old man's body out. Almost at the same time, Xiao Yang raised his other palm and twisted his body left and right to avoid all the attacks of the strong fighting emperor. Then, he put out his palms together, or punched or palms, and blasted back the 10 strong fighting emperors one by one. 10 high-ranking fighting emperors, such a lineup, can be called the top luxury lineup in the outside world. Looking at the whole western region, they can walk horizontally. However, at the moment, in Xiao Yang's hands, they can't even resist a punch. Under the situation of exerting power and fighting spirit together, Xiao Yang's combat strength has not lost a 9-star fighting emperor, and his far more terrible physical strength makes his every fist full of strength. Unless it is the 9-star fighting emperor, any strong fighting emperor below is doomed to be unable to bear Xiao Yang's fist. As for the old man just now, if he hadn't underestimated Xiao Yang's combat power, he wouldn't have ended up being beaten back by Xiao Yang. It's just a pity that he paid his due price for his absolute self-confidence and his disdain for Xiao Yang. At the same time, in the battle circle on the other side, the 9-star fighting emperor who fought with the North King looked like a piece of iron blue on his old face, and the muscles around his mouth twitched. He didn't expect that the puppet in front of him would be so terrible. With his strength in the middle of the 9-star fighting emperor, he didn't take any advantage of it. Instead, he was horrified to find that the strength of the North King was increasing in the collision, which seemed to be a sign of breaking through the later stage of the 9-star duty. Damn it, this thing is too evil, old ghost. What are you doing? Take that boy away. There was a low scold in his mouth. The old man just turned his head and looked at the direction where Xiao Yang was at the moment. Suddenly, he was shocked by Xiao Yang's terrible combat power. Even his shrinking body couldn't help but lag slightly. The distracted moment was caught by the North King. When the old man regained consciousness in fear, the North King's fist hit the old man's chest. Bang! With a low bang, the old man turned white and couldn't help shedding a trace of blood on his mouth. His body flew back uncontrollably. Then he was stopped by the old man. After confirming that the injury was all right, Chi looked at the North King with dignified eyes. In the middle of the air, Xiao Yang blew a 7-star fighting emperor out with a palm. Then, he took back his eyes, turned his eyes, and fell on the young man in white robe. His face was also calm. I won't kill them. Now, get out of the way. Xiao Yang's tone was plain, but it was not difficult to hear the meaning of impatience contained in it. He was still remembering the power of the source of the soul and the formula of returning to the source. He really didn't want to stay any longer. Hearing the speech, the young man couldn't help showing a dignified look on his face, but his steps didn't move away. Instead, he raised his arm and stretched out his palm to Xiao Yang. Immediately, his 5 fingers slowly grasped it. At the moment when he clenched his fist with his palm, his body suddenly disappeared in place. When he appeared again, he had appeared in front of Xiao Yang, and a fist was pounding down on the latter's face. Xiao Yang's eyes were slightly frozen, and he couldn't help feeling a burst of surprise. The young man in white was also a 9-star fighting emperor. Such speed, in most of the 9-star fighting emperors, can also be regarded as the leader, but he is facing Xiao Yang. At the moment when the young man's figure appeared, Xiao Yang raised his hand and slapped his backhand to block the young man's fist. Then, his wrist turned and fell on the latter's left shoulder. Bang! However, the young man's body turned into a mist at the moment when Xiao Yang's palm fell, and disappeared quickly. A little surprised in his heart, Xiao Yan couldn't help feeling a burst of surprise. The young man's speed was so fast that he couldn't catch it. You know, under the cover of powerful soul power, no matter how fast the young man is, he can't completely hide. However, at that moment, the breath of the latter completely disappeared under the exploration of Xiao Yang's soul power. That is to say, the reason why the young man can avoid his blow is not speed, but the power of the road. It's really amazing. Xiao Yang immediately guessed that the power of the avenue could show such an amazing speed. Among all the power of the avenue, in addition to his void avenue, there is another kind of wind avenue. Then the next moment, when Xiao Yang found the power of the road used by the latter, a palm suddenly fell on Xiao Yang's back. Then, the powerful power suddenly gushed out. Hiss. This time, the young man failed. What? You are not the only one who can control the power of the road. The faint voice of words fell on the young man's ear. At the same time, a cold palm also fell on the young man's neck. All this in the hall is very long, but in fact, all the battles are just a few minutes. In order to solve the immediate problems as soon as possible, Xiao Yang has no reservation this time. Except that the injury is not fatal, both his speed and strength can be called terror for these people in front of him. Before the closed stone gate, Xiao Yang controlled the young man's neck from the back of his palm. Although he didn't intend to kill this guy, he didn't mind killing him if the latter dared to do anything excessive. Anyway, I have many enemies. It doesn't hurt to have another one. The power of the road. I didn't expect you to be able to master the power of the road, but you think you can control me by this? Under Xiao Yang's control, the young man sneered and wanted to extricate himself from Xiao Yang's hands with the help of the power of the road. Shua. After getting out of trouble from Xiao Yang's hands, the young man looked cold and retreated. He immediately stood on the void not far from Xiao Yang, looked at Xiao Yang with a sneer and said coldly, So far, no one can really control me. Even if you can put your hand on my neck, you can't either. Oh, really? Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang smiled jokingly. There was an inexplicable meaning in the speech. What do you mean? The young man's face sank, and he had a bad feeling, but judging from the current situation, his concern was obviously superfluous. Didn't you find that you were still surrounded by the power of my avenue from beginning to end? What are you talking about? Xiao Yang smiled faintly, but the expression on the young man's face changed suddenly, and his eyes flew around. At the same time, in the void around him, 6 tents suddenly emerged, and then gathered quickly to surround the young man. With Xiao Yang's control, this time, the young man returned to Xiao Yang again under the control of the void avenue. Damn it, when is this? The young man was shocked and wildly mobilized the power of the road to get out of the control of the 6 tents again. However, he is not so lucky every time. Under the control of Xiao Yang's void avenue, the power of the avenue he can control is not enough to make him break free from it. On the contrary, the continuous struggle will make the 6 tents tightly wrapped around his body more restrained, so as to bring him greater pain. I think you'd better save your strength. Even if you also master the power of the road, you should only understand it soon. I think your wind road can only be used 6 times at most. With this alone, you can't break away from my void road. Seeing the youth trying to resist, Xiao Yang smiled and said, What, Void Avenue? You actually understand Void Avenue? Originally, the young man thought that Xiao Yang could guess that he would understand the power of the avenue soon, which had shocked him. But when he heard that the power of the avenue controlled by Xiao Yang was actually a void avenue, his shock was even worse. The power of the avenue is the most difficult power to control between heaven and earth. It is far more powerful than fighting qi and source qi and cannot be tolerated by the human body. Among the power of the avenue with different attributes between heaven and earth, the void avenue is at the forefront. The strength of the void avenue is far more than the so-called wind avenue. The void avenue can be called rolling in terms of strength and speed. Now, the hearts of the young people understand why the power of the avenue they are proud of is so unbearable in the face of Xiao Yang. On the other side, seeing that the young master of his family was controlled by Xiao Yang, the 2 old men and the strong fighting emperors who were injured each quickly surrounded Xiao Yang. As for the North King, under Xiao Yang's control, he returned to the latter. A pair of empty eyes scanned the people around him, revealing the spirit of killing and cutting all over his body. It's even more chilling. He glanced at Bei Wang's body. Xiao Yan couldn't help brightening his eyes. From then on, the black thunder flickering on Bei Wang's body surface can be seen that the thunder power accumulated in his body is being rapidly refined and absorbed. Perhaps because of the fight just now, the speed of thunder refining and chemical integration in Bei Wang's body has accelerated a lot. This surprised Xiao Yang. Although the power of the source of the soul and the formula of returning to the source have not been found, it is also good news for Xiao Yang. Boy, we really underestimated your power, but I still want to tell you that he is someone you can't kill. If you kill him, you will regret it. He stopped several people who couldn't help but want to fight next to him. The white-robed old man who had shot Xiao Yang before stared at Xiao Yang with a dignified face and a very low tone. Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang smiled non-committally. He really listened to such words too much, and he did countless things to disobey the result. Therefore, Xiao Yang didn't take such threatening words of the old man to heart at all. Of course, he won't really kill the young people because of this. Just like what he doubts in his heart, although these people are hostile to him, they are not necessarily killed. Therefore, compared with killing them, Xiao Yang is more curious about why these people shot at him. If I kill him, will I regret it? I don't know, but I'm sure if you don't tell me who you are and why you come to trouble me, he will die. Xiao Yang looked at the old man in front of him indifferently. There was a fierce look in his face. The latter also stared at him with a gloomy face after hearing this. Only after a good film did he speak in a low voice and say in a deep voice, "Boy, do you remember Murong Qianqian?" Once the old man blurted out his words, the expression on Xiao Yang's face was momentary stagnation. At the same time, in his mind, he couldn't help recalling the exquisite girl he met when he first entered the Shilin Mountains. Over the years, I think the latter has grown more and more graceful. Qian, I don't know how Niz has been these years. With a low whisper in his mouth, Xiao Yang couldn't help feeling a little regret for the rapid change of time. However, does this matter have anything to do with Qianqian? Xiao Yang frowned, and the fighting spirit in his body moved involuntarily. If this is bad for Murong Qianqian, he will immediately kill all the people present. The man who is now bound by you is Murongxuan. He is Miss Qianqian's brother. Looking at the city below absently, Xiao Yang's body was running rapidly in the street, confused. Just now, after Murong Xian's general narration, he understood why the latter would attack him. A few years ago, since Murong Qianqian was picked up by his fourth uncle Murong Hao, the girl has been depressed all day. It seems that she has some thoughts. The whole person is not as lively as usual. If she was such a quiet girl in the past, his father and brother would be pleased with it. After all, Murong Qianqian is a busy master, even in the family, except for her father and brother, everyone will be afraid of her. However, after the Hui nationality, Murong Qianqian suddenly seemed to be a different person, which made his father and brother worried about it. This situation lasted for more than a few months. In the end, Murong Qianqian, who didn't like cultivation, somehow stuffed into the family's special cultivation room. This stay was for several years. Until recently, Murong Qianqian withdrew from the long-term isolation, but then, his brother and father didn't relax, the girl disappeared in an instant. This time, even the family elders could not find the trace of the latter's disappearance. Until this time, his fourth uncle Murong Hao just told their father and son about Xiao Yang. While they were shocked, they quickly sent someone out to search for Murong Qianqian. Murong Xian's team came to look for Murong Qianqian. Even this trip to the ancient tomb was not only to find Xiao Yang, but also to find Murong Qianqian. However, when they arrived here, they found that the girl didn't seem to be here. In this way, Xiao Yang has become their goal. It's a pity that they underestimated Xiao Yang's strength. It was careless that Xiao Yang solved it so easily. If both sides had no intention of killing, I'm afraid Murong Xian and his party would have turned into a pile of corpses at this time. After understanding the news, Xiao Yang left the hall with full of melancholy. He decided to go to Murong Qianqian after his trip to the ancient tomb. However, before that, he still needed to find the power of the original source of Heaven Ju's human soul and another volume of Return to the Source formula. Soon, Xiao Yan came to the Five Forks again, almost without any hesitation. Xiao Yan rushed directly into the street in the center. Whether he could find those two things depends on this time. At the same time, in another hall, many figures are standing at random. Vigilant eyes scan each other, and no one dares to act rashly. In the middle of the crowd, a huge energy light is slowly floating. When everyone looks at this energy, there will be a heavy color of greed in their eyes. It seems that there is nothing else in the hall. The fighting spirit inheritance should be the precious treasure left by the Heavenly Master. Hey, if you can swallow and refine the fighting spirit of a strong person in the source environment, won't you be able to create a super strong person out of thin air? It's really ignorant. What's the source territory? At the peak of the cultivation of Tianjue, but it was not long after he set foot in the source territory that the real strong man chose to retire. After that, he completely disappeared on the mainland. You people with no ambition thought he was the source territory. It's stupid. Although Chen Zhen's words had a strong sense of disdain, when these words were introduced into the ears of the surrounding people, they not only did not bring any waves, but set off a wave of shock among the people. Return to the source. In those days, Tianjue Master has become a strong man returning to the source territory. The words full of shock spread rapidly in the hall. Chen Zhen's words made these people's already hot eyes become more hot at the moment, and the fire of greed in their hearts is even worse. When they look at the inheritance of fighting spirit in the field, they are full of infinite vision. If the inheritance of fighting spirit of a strong person who returns to the source environment can be obtained and successfully devour the refining, doesn't it mean that with the power of fighting spirit inheritance, there is a great chance that the Western regions will add another strong person in the source environment in the near future, and they will become one of the candidate? Whoosh! Driven by greed, there will always be people who can't help but start first. Sure enough, it's only a moment. Somewhere in the crowd, an old man in yellow robes suddenly rushes out and runs towards the fighting spirit at a lightning speed. However, the gun hit the head bird, and the old man appeared, which made him the target of everyone in the field in an instant. However, in a twinkling of an eye, the great seven-star fighting emperor died under the joint action of everyone in the field. At this moment, the battle in the hall also began. Boom, boom. The fierce explosion was heard continuously in the hall, and human shadows flew away. From time to time, strong people were forcibly blasted out from the crowd. What's more, they were shot by many people together, which exploded into a blood fog in an instant. The red blood soon covered the floor of the hall. Until the end, in the hall, there were only a few forces and the people of the three main gates, only some powerful scattered practitioners were left, and they were still unwilling to stay here. Among them, the most powerful ones are Refining God Sect and Zhanwu Sect. As for Yi Luotian, the people behind him are scattered in the fight, and the robes covered on them have already fallen off to the ground. It seems that they are likely to have died in the war just now. What's the matter? Are you going to continue to compete with us? At this time, Chen Zhen and Wu Jitian stood side by side. They didn't fight each other because there was only a group of fighting spirit here. On the contrary, they cooperated with each other very tacitly to resist the rest. Although this group's fighting spirit inheritance seems extremely powerful, it can also be seen from their skills that the power in this group's fighting spirit inheritance is not as powerful as they imagined. Just as they said before, Tianjue, as a strong person in the source territory, can be called the first person in history in the Western regions, but look at the power contained in this group's fighting spirit inheritance, but it is far from reaching the level they expected. When they think of the previous 5 intersections, the two patriarchs suddenly understand that there is likely to be more than one fighting spirit inheritance. In order to maximize their respective interests, at present, cooperation has become a very good choice for them. As soon as the remaining forces heard Chen Zhen's words, their greed immediately decreased by more than half. Compared with a single strength, they may be able to barely compare with the two people in front of them, but if they join hands, they will no longer have any opportunities. As for the mutual cooperation between Chen Array and Wu Jitian, these forces present can't do it. There are more or less strength gaps between them. They don't believe in each other. They don't have to think about what will happen if they work together. Therefore, instead of wasting their efforts, these forces chose to retreat after all. Seeing the steps of several forces in the field gradually receding, Chen Zhen and Wu Jitian looked at each other, and a satisfied smile appeared at the corners of their mouths. Soon, their eyes turned and looked at the fighting spirit behind them. Lord Wu, as long as you and I practice, I believe there are few forces that can rival you and me in this ancient tomb. Chen Array smiled with golden eyes, and his words were full of arrogance. As a 9-star fighting emperor and a 4th-order array mage, such strength was enough to make him superior among the strong at the same level, and Wu Jitian was good at physical strength. They worked together to attack and defend, which was undoubtedly the best combination. Chen Zhen, I advise you not to be too careless. In this team, Qin Yun, his background is terrible. Even you and I can't easily fight against him. Hearing Chen Zhen's words, Wu Jitian shook his head solemnly. Although he seemed to have developed limbs, he was definitely not a simple person. If anyone dared to underestimate him, he would pay a great price. What about the father of Huiyuan territory? As long as we get these fighting spirit inheritance, we can also advance Huiyuan territory. At that time, this western region will not be the place where he can cover the sky with one hand in the Qin Wasteland and Fan Valley. Chen Zhen sneered. The smile looked particularly ferocious. Even the Wu Jitian in front of him could not help but feel cold in his heart. Besides, the most troublesome guy, we can't solve it. As Wu Jitian said, nature is Xiao Yang. With the Thunder Punishment Oath as a check and balance, as long as they are in the ancient tomb, they can't attack Xiao Yang, otherwise they will be punished by the Thunder Punishment Oath. That power, even they, will be afraid of it. As long as they are still in the ancient tomb, their heads seem to have a cone thorn all the time, watching their every move in prison, making them uncomfortable. When he leaves here, he must pay the price of bleeding. Chen Zhen scolded coldly, but at the next moment, a ghostly figure suddenly appeared behind them. Go out. In my opinion, this is quite suitable for your cemetery, so stay. While the figure appeared, the hoarse voice of words as cold as the water of the yellow spring suddenly sounded in their ears. Almost at the same time, around their bodies, the children of the sect also suddenly made a sad cry. Then, they heard a sound of falling to the ground. But in a twinkling of an eye, the team of nearly 20 people in the 2 cases were all dead. The next moment, when Chen Zhen and Wu Jitian hurried back to their senses and retreated violently, they looked unbelievable. The figure behind them was. Leaves fall into the sky. This video will end here.